Get ready for the ride of your life as Uber and Lyft threaten to leave California. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. This is Afternoons LA. Hope you're good and safe. This is our 2-hour programming block that starts every day at 3:30 with the check, then goes to Hazard Pay. Next, FPUC, and finally rent assistance. This video is about Hazard Pay, with really one of the most shocking developments about a workplace that involves essential workers that could be gone this Friday. What does this mean for drivers and passengers in the state of California? What does it mean for rideshare across the state of California? And why does it impact the issue of hazard pay, and especially Uber and Lyft drivers across the country? The shocking details about Uber and Lyft were detailed on this channel literally nearly 4 months ago. This channel first debuted on April 25th. And as we approach 2,000 subscribers today, making YouTube history, the first channel to ever reach 200,000 subscribers in 111 days, less than 4 months, we were detailing Uber and Lyft for purposes of PUA and UI assistance. It was the issue of whether Uber and Lyft drivers are employees or are they independent contractors. We had detailed it a lot of videos. And at that time, there was a big percolating question about which one were they. What happened, ironically, was I learned from viewers that there was a big problem about classification for purposes of benefits, even before hazard pay had been introduced to the Senate in the stimulus package called the HEROES Act from the Democrats, passed in the House. The issue was the following. Some states were not paying Uber and Lyft drivers PUA, Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, calling them UI and telling them to switch over to UI. Other states were paying them PUA. And so I saw a problem brewing. And then came this. A lawsuit was filed by the State Attorney General of California against Uber and Lyft here in California. We've joined it by 2 city attorneys, Los Angeles and San Diego, that said, hey, Uber and Lyft is violating California law for purposes of employment. It was so ironic because it was exactly what this channel had been questioning for weeks. It was at the same time that stimulus checks and stimulus packages for purposes of Uber and Lyft were heating up in Congress. Congress had an issue separate and apart than from even hazard pay that did classify essential workers as Uber and Lyft drivers, that Uber and Lyft drivers may be entitled to additional sums of money. We detailed a lot of videos at the time about how members of Congress were considering an additional stimulus package just for Uber and Lyft drivers of several thousands of dollars because they thought, 1, they were not paid enough money, 2, that they were employees, not independent contractors, and 3, they're entitled to workplace security as lockdowns would be lifted going forward. Nothing really ever happened with that bill, which called for thousands of dollars to be handed put in the hands of Uber and Lyft drivers. But the lawsuit continued. And the lawsuit sought thousands of dollars to be returned to every Uber and Lyft driver. The lawsuit alleged that Uber and Lyft intentionally misclassified its drivers as independent contractors, not as employees, so that they could avoid the obligations of employee-employer relationships in the state of California, which are the same in every state. That they would have to pay payroll taxes, that they have to ensure that the employee gets employee benefits, that they would have to ensure the employee gets any type of overtime and things like that. All issues tied to hazard pay. And so the case started, and it slowly meandered, and a few weeks passed, and then this week came the decision. It ruled, as reported first in this channel, that Uber and Lyft did misclassify its drivers, that those workers were employees, not independent contractors, and ordered within 10 days Uber and Lyft to stop classifying them as independent contractors forthwith. It's fascinating because hazard pay has a classification that says rideshare drivers. $10,000 for rideshare drivers based upon the number of hours they worked as employees, not as independent contractors. In fact, hazard pay fully claimed that these rideshare drivers were employees, not independent contractors. Sound familiar? It is. It's exactly what the state of California claimed. And so while you sit back and wonder, well, I was a rideshare driver, I worked during the pandemic, how much hazard pay would I be entitled to? Well, it's $13 an hour times the number of hours you work from January up to the present. And presuming you didn't make over $100,000 last year at Uber or Lyft, which you probably did not, you would get $13 an hour times the number of hours you worked, and it would come out to an amount of money. But then there's this. As an Uber and Lyft driver, how many hours are you actually working? Do you keep track of how many hours? Or do you just get paid per job, per gig, per drive, per trip? If the answer is yes, that's part of the confusion. Uber and Lyft was not accounting for employees' activities by the hour, but by the job, which the lawsuit claimed was illegal. Uber and Lyft denied these allegations, but ultimately lost. And so the judge said, stop it within 10 days. Then comes this. Breaking details revealed today here in Los Angeles and across parts of California is that Uber and Lyft are preparing to suspend operations in California this Friday. Last week, 2 representatives said that they would likely suspend services in the state to avoid not compliance with the law. The bottom line is that with this ruling, they don't think they can comply by switching to their drivers to employees, or they simply just don't want to. The end result is, don't try to call an Uber or Lyft this Friday because it may not be there. It's part of the issue with the Rideshare Drivers United and the Transport Workers Union of America, which has now taken care of and protests outside the California Labor Commission amidst the pandemic. But rideshare drivers are now being warned they're moving out of the state. They're suspending the operations. It comes after Uber and Lyft is trying to do a legislative battle called ABS. They're trying to have a law passed that says they could classify their workers as independent contractors. Whether or not that law would actually be, constitutional because it would violate a Supreme Court decision is another thing to be said. But the alternative is other rideshare companies like Alto, Texas-based rideshare services, are now expecting to rush into California to pick up those missing people. The reality is that having W-2 workers is actually significantly more innovative than having contractors in the transportation system, says the CEO of Alto, Will Coleman. We're never going to be as quick as Uber and Lyft. In many central business districts, you may be able to get an Uber Lyft in seconds. We don't optimize to that. We tell our customers, look, expect it to be a 10-minute wait, but we deliver 99% of the time. That's not the only upstart. Arcade City is doing the same. So what does this mean about hazard pay? It means that whether you're a state official, who's the attorney general, who's elected official here in California, or you're a member of Congress that are looking at this, based upon your Uber and Lyft proposed legislation, or you're, a state employment office doing PUA and UI assistance, and you're like, oh God, there's another Uber and Lyft person. I'm going to call you independent contract. I'm going to call you employee. Sorry, I'm not going to give you PUA. I'm going to call you UI. It's causing a lot of confusion, and that confusion may ultimately help or hurt people for hazard pay. Here's an example of how it may help. It understands that the workplace needs to be protected. And when you're an employee, you have more protections about workplace security, safety, hazardous environment than someone that is not an employee, aka an independent contractor, as Uber or Lyft wants to classify you. It's negative in some regards that the employer may be trying to suspend operations. So if you have an employer who tries to suspend operations and hazard pay is eventually approved as law, then what happens to your ability to collect that hazard pay? LA Light has been detailing every single day for 3 months now the benefits and the horrors of hazard pay, which is not law yet. You can't go apply for it. There's no online application, has not been voted upon. So don't sit back and say, I'm going to go get that $10,000. I'm going to go get that money from that lawsuit. I'm going to go get that money from that bill. None of these things have been finalized yet. So don't sit around and think that there's going to be $10,000 landing in your bank account tomorrow. Sadly to say, some viewers actually keep on asking that question. So I want to reassure you, the reality is no. There's no $10,000 landing in your bank account tomorrow. But how would it? Well, the employer would have to apply for you. That's the way hazard pay is written. The employer applies for hazard pay, not you. So what happens if the employer doesn't have operations in California anymore, and I'm in California? Well, how do I get my hazard pay? Ask that to the people who drafted the bill, who didn't take in consideration that maybe your employer goes bankrupt, doesn't even operate anymore. How about that restaurant you worked at? That, since restaurant workers are essential workers under hazard pay and are entitled to hazard pay money, how do you go get that if the business is going belly up? A new report issued this afternoon from Andrew Cuomo, I don't have it in front of me, but I read it, governor of New York, said he expects the landscape of small businesses in the state of New York, and especially in New York City, to be desecrated in the next couple of weeks, because a lot of them absolutely cannot comply with ordinances about social distancing by nature of their operation. And he cites restaurants. He says that restaurants could be wiped off the face of the planet in New York City substantially because they simply can't do outdoor dining. There's too many of them that are in small indoor spaces, and they can't afford or cooperate or manipulate their ability to do the operations outside. New York still does not have in dining allowed. With that, if you worked at one of those restaurants in New York during the pandemic all the way up to the present, how would you get your hazard pay? So if the boss goes bankrupt, closes the door, you show up one day, says for sale, says, sorry, where do you go get your hazard pay? Bill doesn't consider it. Marco Rubio warned the same thing. Just a week ago, he said, hey, small businesses across the planet are going to be wiped out. You're not doing PPP money. You're not doing things to save small businesses. Republicans continually say there's not enough money being given to the business owners. Ultimately, that will cause an implosion for purposes of the employees as well. So as we sit here right now, if you're an Uber and Lyft driver in California and you're wondering, how am I going to make money this Saturday? You might want to look for another job, because by all indications, Uber and Lyft may no longer have operations come this Saturday. Hard to say, not confirmed, but these are the reports. There are alerts that are coming out. If you're an Uber Lyft driver in other states, the implication of this lawsuit is overwhelming. There could be simply other lawsuits brought in your state to ensure that you get those benefits as well. Bottom line is that you could be entitled to thousands of dollars if you're an Uber or Lyft driver. And, if it's your livelihood, then unfortunately the pandemic may have taken another hit against you later this week. Coming up next on LA Late is PUA and LWA. Go to the Frontage channel and hit that subscribe and alert button. That subscribe button on the Frontage channel will tell you when a new video goes live. There's a little bell next to it. Hit that as well. And go into the sticky comments and make sure you sign up for alerts. Every time a video comes live, and I know we do a lot of videos on this channel, 7 per day. You'll get an alert every time a video goes live. You'll never have to wait or guess if the video's early, if the video's late. You'll get an alert when the video goes live. We're approaching 200,000 subscribers today or tomorrow. No one in the history of YouTube has ever done it in the shortest time that we have done it, which is going to be somewhere around 111 days. It's just a little bit over 3 months, less than 4 months. It's astronomical. We're here as a family to help one another. We have got through this together. We're going to get through it together. So stay with me. Coming up next is FPUC and then rent assistance. As always, stay informed, stay motivated, stay smiling, and stay with LA for more.